Yes. Big round of applause. And then PSL, Denver, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Denver. DSA, Boulder. Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition. Boulder County Climate Justice Hive. And Boulder Surge, showing up for racial justice. Just like to start us off with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. At, at Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center, we work on a multi-issue approach to grassroots organizing. So another reason we're very grateful to be here together today with so many co-sponsoring organizations. And we're here tonight to talk about how racism has appeared through violent policing. And I'd like for us to remember a few names this evening. There are many more that need to be acknowledged, but a few to bring into the room today are Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Elijah McClain. The National Committee for Justice in Denver brought us this description of Elijah McClain. He was a kind and gentle soul, an introverted musician and massage therapist. He is remembered as unquestionably cheerful, someone who impacted an incredible number of lives with his positivity, charm, and humor. Perhaps most illustrative of his unique spirit, Elijah McClain would spend his lunch breaks playing violin to shelter animals who were waiting to be adopted so they wouldn't get lonely. This really touches all of our hearts to think on this and this extraordinary, tragic injustice that we are facing. And so we are here tonight to speak out against this injustice, to come together as community and stand up, because we will not accept a passive peace. We are not a community that sleeps sound knowing this injustice has occurred and knowing that a person who has been appointed as an interim police chief was involved with this injustice. So we're here to learn more about this tonight and come together to talk about what we do want to see. What kind of positive change do we want to see? What will we not accept? We will not remain silent. We will use our voices. We will keep stepping up and speaking up till we see justice. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce next our speakers this evening. Elle Taylor is an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a lifelong musician. She started playing violin at the age of 8, went to college for music, and still plays semi-professionally with multiple chamber groups. She helped organize the campaign for justice for Elijah McClain, and subsequently organized around the freedom for her fellow organizers targeted by Aurora Police Department. She is currently helping to organize the movement around the murder of Killian Lewis at the hands of Aurora Police Department. Annette James, president of the NAAC Boulder County branch. Thank you, Annette. And round of applause, please, for Elle and for Annette. And next, I'd like to introduce Darren O'Connor, NAAC Boulder County Branch Criminal Justice Committee Chair He worked on many social justice issues and got tired of begging lawyers to help, so became one himself in 2019. He used to regularly film the police in Boulder and became aware of how viciously they sometimes treated people, especially and including our unhoused neighbors. He enjoys his family, which includes 3 dogs, 2 cats, camping, and holding the police accountable. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darren O'Connor.
So we've got a lot to share with you tonight. This is about educating you all about who is our interim police chief and what are the qualities we want in a police chief and why he ain't it. So I'm going to just get going. Chris has kindly introduced all of our sponsors. I want to say a lot of work went into getting us all here. Again, apologies for getting started late, but I'm so grateful that you're here. I know I've got a lot of friends in the room and new friends to be made. I love coming together for community to work on these kind of issues. So our topics, I kind of hit on them. We've got a new chief of police coming. I believe on July 8th, they got their first group of candidates that they're considering. There's significant issues with our current interim police chief, Stephen Redfern. And we're going to hear from Elle Taylor, who you heard a little bit about from PSL. She does a lot of organizing in Aurora, and she was actually at the violin vigil where the police used a lot of chemical agents on protesters and violin. I shouldn't call them protesters. It was a violin vigil, right? And nearly shut that down. So I'm really glad she could come all the way out here for that. And like I said, we're going to talk about the criterion we should expect of a police chief and why Mr. Redfern is not it. So not that long ago, at least in my mind, Greg Testa was the chief of police in Boulder. How many people remember Greg Testa, right? So Greg retired shortly after Zaid Atkinson was held at gunpoint. This was the young black man at Naropa, college student who was held at gunpoint for the crime of being black and cleaning up the campus. Maris Harold came to us in 2020. She replaced him. She promised a lot of progressive policing under her watch, but was a bit of a disappointment, and that's an understatement. Then in September of 2021, under Maris Harold, and under Nuria Vandermeid, our current city manager, Boulder hired Stephen Redfern to become the deputy chief. And it happened within days of his quote unquote retirement from the Aurora Police Department. And then Chief Harold resigned in January of this year. So now Redfern has been appointed interim chief of police and is being considered for the police chief position, which is a competitive process in theory. So Redfern has a pretty horrific past. We have shared all of this with City Council. We have shared this with our city manager, and their response has been, "What else you got?" But I hope you will see why that is so shocking to me and others. That isn't this enough? On the night of Elijah McClain's murder by the Aurora Police Department, he was on duty as a captain and changed the call logs regarding the basis for the dispatch call. He changed it from suspicious person to assault on an officer. It went from, we're just going to check on this guy. He's waving his arms. We don't know. That seems wrong for a black person to do walking down the street. He had a mask on before COVID. And without investigating really, Redfern, who was the night duty captain, showed up on the scene, was told by the officers who were there, oh, he tried to reach for a gun. And the closest thing he could figure to call that was assault on an officer. There's so much to be said about that, and we'll touch on it a little later. In 2016, another lowlight for Redfern, he pursued a black male suspect out of the Aurora jurisdiction. He chased him into Denver. The Denver police joined in the pursuit. The man got out of his vehicle and started running. Redfern was, from the articles we've read, Redfern was racing after this guy with multiple Denver Police Department officers. Redfern is the only one who shot this black man. And Denver police aren't known for their restraint. So that's very concerning to me. Then at the peaceful violin vigil, I've mentioned it. Who knows about the violin vigil and the vicious stopping that? So I'm going to rely on Ella to share about that. But it was basically a vigil, people coming together to remember this sweet young man that the police in Aurora killed in a very peaceful way. And they had, my understanding is they had had a permit. They were on the municipal lawn, and the police decided to just start using chemical weapons. I've looked and scoured for videos. There were a few people like throwing water bottles, trying to confront the police way away from the vigil. And what it ended, they just came out like stormtroopers. And as you'll see, Redfern instructed people to start using chemical weapons and did so himself. So he deployed a pepper foam fogger at the vigil at attendees and who were engaged in peaceful, lawful protest. And again, it was a vigil. Aurora paid. So the city likes to say, well, that case was dismissed. It was a whole bunch of nothing. But the reality is it's nothing because they paid $750,000 to make it go away. And Redfern was one of the people instructing people what to do. He was high up in the police force there. He later testified in Elijah McClain's trial and admitted to changing the call logs. That's how we found out. And he also testified that he was retired. He said in testimony, I'm retired, or he was retired from the Aurora PD. He didn't, it's very important. I think this is an important point because he didn't mention I'm also the deputy chief of police in Boulder. You'll see that there was what really appears strongly to be a concerted effort to not let that information get out. So he made a soft landing as deputy police chief in Boulder. Let's see. So this statistic, this sentence I'm going to share with you, this is about how bad it is for Black people living in Aurora. APD allows and permits officers to routinely use excessive force, according to the police scorecard. The same source states that based on population, a Black person was almost 4 times as likely to be killed by police as a white person in Aurora from 2013 to 2021. And with the death of Kylan Lewis, we can see that it doesn't seem to be getting better. They've got a consent decree. They're not keeping up with their commitments on that. It is a mess. And that is where our interim chief comes from. Now, I mentioned they've tried to keep it quiet that he came from there. In the original biography, there's a bio page for the chief of police and the deputy chief of police. It used to be, until we raised this issue, if you went to look at Stephen Redfern's bio, it said he had 22 years or something like that of police experience. It didn't mention where. But if you went to Chief Harold's page, her bio, when she was the chief, in the first sentence, it said on the city's website that she began her professional career as a social worker and joined the Cincinnati Police Department in 1993. So that first sentence, but it's nowhere in the bio until we raised this issue. It was only after the NAACP Boulder County branch called this omission out that Boulder modified his biography and included his work history was with APD, and that is the only place he worked before he came to Boulder. Redfern has defended his actions on the night of Elijah McClain's death in part by stating it was his actions that resulted in APD assigning a critical incident response team to assess the actions that led to McClain's killing. Later, an independent team issued a report to Aurora and talked about what their own internal investigations and their own reports on how it all happened and how bad it was. It is a very long and scathing independent report, part of which says interviews conducted by major crime investigators failed to ask basic critical questions about the justification for the use of force necessary for any prosecutor to make a determination about whether the use of force was legally justified. Instead, this is important, the questions frequently appeared designed to elicit a specific exonerating magic language found in court rulings, the kind of things that lawyers and judges can latch onto and go, oh, there's nothing to see here. There's a whole lot more that can be said about the consent decree. If you are at all interested, I would encourage looking up the Attorney General's investigation and report on them as well. So Redfern's effort to assign a critical incident response team simply led to investigators writing a report that sought to exonerate the officers that murdered Elijah McClain. He also claims he changed the call logs because what officers told him on scene. He never even watched the body-worn camera videos of those officers to look for himself. And I don't have it in here, but at police oversight panel meetings, he's talked about, well, I had no reason to question them. He was in a city that kills black men at 4 times the rate of the rest of the population. He's in a city where this independent investigation and the Attorney General have found that they routinely on body-worn camera video say, stop resisting, stop reaching for my weapon. That's documented. That's who they are. And Stephen Redfern says, I had no reason to question the officers there. He was there for 22 years in a leadership position, and he believed that he could just trust his officers. Attorney General Phil Weiser issued his own report, I've been mentioning that, about APD, and observed officers generically reciting stop resisting when trying to control subjects, even though it appeared from available evidence the subject was not resisting. They lied on camera to protect themselves. So after Redfern came to Boulder, he spoke to news media about a young black man that had fired a gun on the hill in Boulder. And he stated on camera that BPD was building a case to really throw the book at them. That young black man has been in jail for nearly 2 years. If his trial date hasn't changed, it's like July 28th or 29th. That'll be our next rallying effort to try to get some justice for black folks in Boulder. That young man maintains that he was defending himself against a group of initial aggressors that had a gun and continued moving towards him even when he flashed a semi-automatic weapon at them to keep them from coming at him. And ultimately, he shot a bullet on the ground as these guys with a gun who were initially pulled out the gun came at him and his group of friends. So he shot at the ground. Is that smart? No. Is it very arguably self-defense? Yes. Should we be sensitive to wanting to put a black man, this kid's 24 now, 22 at the time. Do we want to put him away essentially until he's looks more like me at 55 than he does now at 24? It's not justice. That's my opinion. So Redfern wanting to throw the book at him makes clear that he at the very least lacks racial sensitivity, and at worst, he views black youth as deserving of harsh sentences. Since serving as deputy chief and then interim chief of police that he is now, since he took on that role, Boulder police shot and killed a woman last winter for wielding a fake pistol. They delayed producing her body-worn camera video, even though the law was passed after George Floyd was murdered that requires such video to be released. And just a side note, that was the SB 2217 law. Maris Herald actually went to the legislature. That's when we started to really know who we were dealing with, and campaigned and lobbied against passing that law. When BPD did release the videos, after at least one lawyer made a request for the videos, BPD edited the videos, including placing a narrative into them. So it looks as good as it can for Boulder police. And then they released that. They did not, however, provide it to the community as required by this law. And they demanded thousands of dollars. I believe it was around $8,000 when the first request went in, so that they could edit it, and then produce it. When what was needed was transparency, produce the video. After that, he falsely stated, I can say with confidence, in a police oversight panel meeting, that anyone, I quote, anyone can get the unredacted video from our records section, trying to promote himself as transparent. They were asking for $8,000 for it. People ask, well, we'll just get a couple minutes, surrounding the shooting. Oh, that's 4,000 or whatever it was. It was thousands of dollars. And now there's a lawsuit against the city for failing to comply with that 2020 law.
Darren, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Holly. Hi.
Hi.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Will you ask Gabby to check Zoom? Someone's in the waiting
Actually,
room.
I'm just realizing it's me, and
Okay.
I've been someone. All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, I can only see this, so I can't see Zoom, so I may be screwing that up. So Redfern failed at that police oversight panel meeting. He said it's available for the public. You can request it. He failed to mention that several people had tried to get them and were unable to do so because of the exorbitant cost. This omission, in my opinion, lie from Redfern, is telling regarding his lack of transparency, which is pretty much number one on our list of criterion for a police chief. I'll share now a number of important criterion, speaking of that, for a police chief, which will reveal in large part why Stephen Redfern is not it. So before I move on, I'd like to share with you that after the NAACP Boulder County branch began raising concerns about Redfern serving as deputy chief of police, he very quickly hired former district attorney Stan Garnett to represent him. Garnett previously represented a candidate for city council and sued many progressives, Boulder progressives, some of them in this room, I believe, that were advocates in the community. And Stan Garnett, on behalf of that individual, sued them for defamation. All but one got their case dismissed, and I believe that Garnett's client had to pay their attorney fees. But that said, we are here today. Everything I'm sharing with you has a citation. There's an article. It was from his testimony. There's nothing I'm saying today that I can't back up, because we know that what Redfern wanted to do was sue us. In fact, the story about him shooting a black man, it was in the arm or the hand, chasing this guy in Denver. We saw an email from either Marist Herald or Redfern saying the NAACP, they've got it all wrong. I mean, they're saying I murdered a black man in Denver. No, we never said that. You know why we never said that? Because we read and we kept it very truthful. And we're going to be asking you tonight to go to city council, and somewhere around here is Giselle, who is the brilliant person who created that flyer for us. Thank you, Giselle. And she's got, you might want to go ahead and hand those out now. We're going to be asking folks to go to city council and speak. And we're going to be asking, there's 2 QR codes. One of them is an action item where Giselle has brilliantly made it a few clicks. You enter some information, and the city council and the city manager will get that letter. We have made sure everything in there is cited in the actual letter. You'll see the citation so you can read more. So we from the Boulder branch of the NAACP have been incredibly careful to ensure everything we've stated about Redfern is backed up by evidence. And thus far, Redfern and Garnett have not filed any lawsuits. In fact, somewhere out here, Annette is our president, Annette James, who will be speaking a little bit, saw him at a meeting and was like, go ahead, if I remember right. Go ahead, you gonna sue us? What have we lied about? Everything we're saying is true. So let's talk about criterion for a good police chief. And let me lead by saying that our branch reviewed the previous candidates for police chief in Boulder and felt that, based on what she said, Marist Herald was, I meant to change that to a good candidate, was a good candidate. it's left us feeling, I've already talked about how she went to the legislature without permission of the city council and spoke against multiple bills that I would consider progressive policing until she was told to stop doing that. That leaves me and our branch really unwilling to endorse anyone for law enforcement because you just don't know who they are until they're hired and they start showing their true colors. But we still need to let the city know it's very important that they at least, it's kind of like getting a Supreme Court justice. They go before the Senate and they make a lot of promises and then they turn over Roe v. Wade. You can't count on it, but they should still have to be grilled. They should still make a commitment, and then they should still be held accountable for not telling the truth. So despite our bad experience with Harold, we still believe this is important. So number one on that list of criterion is a commitment to transparency. I was just at the NAACP National Convention in Las Vegas, sat next to a couple of older gentlemen at a dinner table on the last night. And when I introduced myself and they said, "Oh, you're a lawyer." I said, "Yeah, and one of the funnest things I get to do in life is sue the police." And one of them looked a little quiet, and it turned out he was an ex-police officer. But it turned out to be a really wonderful conversation. And at some point I asked him, "What do you think is the most, we're doing this criterion for police. You've been an officer and I believe it was South Carolina. What do you want to see?" Transparency was his first words out of his mouth. We wish we could get him to apply for this job. One great example of transparency is sharing unredacted body-worn camera video when police use force, especially deadly force on a community member. Redfern fails this criteria, and in fact, the city is being sued for trying to charge those thousands of dollars, as I discussed. Another example of appropriate transparency is not relying on state law to refrain from sharing information with our community just because the law says the police can do so. I'm going to give you an example in case that doesn't make sense. I have an example. There was another officer, Officer Lolatai, who no longer works in Boulder. He was under investigation for a variety of reasons, not the least of which he had use of force Fridays on his social media page where he would exalt these officers who beat the hell out of people. I got a postcard from him at three different addresses, one of which was my present address with my wife, and two went to other locations my wife had lived prior. Someone did their homework. They didn't quite get it right. That identical postcard, went out several places. This is the postcards. Dare Bear is something I'm called on social media by one friend. And wasn't that guy. Thank you for the paid vacay. So while he was on paid leave, he sent me this. And why I'm telling you this, getting back to just not meeting the minimum of the law. So I've wrote complaints. I wrote to the DA. Internal Affairs actually did an investigation. And Officer Lolatai said, "Oh, that was my mother-in-law from Hawaii. She sent those to you." And they said, "Oh, well, we can't prove anything else. So it's unfounded. We can't do anything about this." So I talked to the officer from the Professional Standards Unit and said, "Hey, I'd like to see the evidence." He said, "Oh, state law says we don't have to give that to you." I said, "Yeah, but the law just changed, or it's changing next month." He says, "Can't do it." Can't is a funny word, isn't it? I just can't. The law says I don't have to equals I can't. So a month later, I could have gotten that information. I know that officer. I've gone on a ride along with him. I happen to find him to be a fine human being. I find him to be a concerning police officer. So the police departments and the city, they use the law as both a shield and a sword. When they want to withhold information, they just say, "Oh, state law tells us we can't do that." And when they want to go after somebody, you forgot to turn your blinker on 5 seconds before you turn, they're going to go after you. How many of you ever have heard of this lawful but awful term? I think the first time I heard it was when Tamir Rice was killed by an officer. I believe that was in Ohio. I think he was 12 years old, sitting in a library, outside of a library with a fake plastic gun. Normally they have the orange tip on it. Someone called and said, "Hey, there's a young boy out. He's got this what looks to be a plastic or a fake gun." Police come screaming up on him. The officer in the passenger side seat jumps out of the car and shoots him within something like 2 seconds. Cops who want to convince us that they're on our side say, "Yeah, it's lawful, but it sure is awful." Like, they found that person, that officer didn't do anything wrong. He jumped out of that car and shot that kid in seconds. And it's just awful, but it's lawful. We should aim higher than lawful, but awful in Boulder. So that's another criterion, is that a police chief be completely committed to officers relying on de-escalation techniques rather than a focus on getting suspects to comply with their orders. How many times have you watched just before someone gets shot? You have to comply. I gave you an order. Comply, comply. That is kind of the starting point when they have any fear of you. And how many of you, how quickly do you think they're afraid of you if you're a suspect? What percentage? It's high. So reliance on compliance leads to people, for example, with neurological disabilities who may not be able to process what they're being told to do in seconds, or if they're deaf. I mean, we had a case in Boulder just not that long ago. A Latina woman got kicked out of a shelter, the SPAN shelter, and the police just they took her children, and I don't remember all the details, but it was related to I think she spoke a different language, or she was deaf. I can't remember. Yeah, she was deaf. There was no one there who could speak to her. She ended up losing her kids for quite a while. It's always about compliance with these guys. Yeah, I believe they settled on that. I think I know why I had the wrong word about the best candidate, but I had a few more slides, but I cannot control this. And we want to get you out of here at a reasonable time and have a dialogue. So I'm going to end it there. And in part, I was going to put up a slide with the QR codes. Giselle has kindly saved me from my technical difficulties. And so next up, I do want to give Ella a chance a chance to speak about the experiences in Aurora, where this officer came from. Thank you all.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you, Darren, for that incredible presentation. Truly infuriating in moments, but so illuminating. Like Darren said, my name is Elle. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. I move around a lot, so if you can't, just like wave. Oh. Check, check. Oh, great. Okay. My name is Elle Taylor. I am an organizer with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We are mostly out of Denver, but we work in Boulder a little bit, and we work in Aurora quite extensively. And so I want to start this evening by telling you about my experience at the violin vigil for Elijah McClain. I have been a violinist, as Chris so kindly read my bio, since I was a kid. And
we might have lost our
oh, sure.
Zoom connection. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm gonna keep going while Darren does some tech stuff. Okay. I've been a violinist since I was a kid. It was the first instrument I felt interested in playing, and it has like a very emotional connection for me. And so after George Floyd was murdered, we were all in the streets in Denver, and it was a very chaotic time. It was really scary. I talked to people who were in the military, and they were saying that this is the scariest thing they had seen since active combat, which is a terrifying position to be in, no matter who you are or where you are, but especially when you feel so compelled to participate, but you really have no clue what you're doing. And then there's an armed police force as you're walking down the street, walking towards you with weapons that they are using. It seems just like willy-nilly. It's a terrifying experience. And so I was arrested on May 30th by the Denver Police Department for disobeying a curfew order, which I felt to be unconstitutional and unlawful. And after that, it was really difficult to go back into the streets. It was very, again, chaotic and confusing and emotional and challenging. And on June 27th of 2020, so about a month after I was arrested, we had been protesting for a month in the streets. In Aurora, they announced this violin vigil. And in my head, I thought, okay, like, we've been at protests, we've been doing these things that are acts of resistance that are out of my comfort zone. And this felt very much in my comfort zone. I said, I know how to do this. Like I can go play music. I can go connect with community in a very different way. And so I got there and we were out, like Darren said, on the municipal lawn. What felt like hundreds of violinists. There were upright bassists, there were cellists, there were plenty of string players, there were people standing in the beds of trucks, lots of young Black men playing violin, which, that's a whole different conversation, but you don't see that very often, especially in professional violin spaces. And it was incredible. It was beautiful. And so we're standing there and everyone had kind of gathered on this lawn and we were kind of in little clusters and we didn't really know what we were going to do. We hadn't like all connected and said, hey, we're going to play these songs, we're going to do this thing. So we're all just kind of playing, trying to listen to each other, trying to see what everyone else is doing so we can all be playing the same thing. And I had a couple friends with me who are not musicians, but they were there just kind of to support and experience the night. And it started off just like very sweet. Like I said, we were all playing music. We were all just trying to listen to each other. It was a bunch of people I had never met. And we were I was in the middle of this group of people and I knew that there were police just to my right. And I could see like the line of them. I could see their helmets above the crowd. And so I knew they were standing there, but that's all I really knew. I was kind of in my little bubble and in that moment. And then all of a sudden I started to feel people push against me on the side. And if you've ever seen anyone play a violin, you need a little bit of room with your arms. So I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, I'll move. And then I looked up and my eyes started stinging. And I was like, oh, I know. I was like, I know this feeling. I know what this is, which I didn't know before a month ago what this was. And I was like, oh, that's pepper spray. And I was for a moment, my brain just like couldn't process it. I was like, this doesn't make sense. And so I look around and I see just people starting to run and move. And I see this line of cops starting to advance towards us. And I look around at everyone playing with me and we're all sort of noticing at the same moment. And as the police move towards us, we move away and we keep playing. And in that moment, this event turned from a vigil and a moment of remembrance and a moment of gentle community into an act of resistance. And those moments are really powerful, right? And I think that we all need to remember that, especially in this moment, whoever the force that created this act of resistance was not us. We showed up to do something that, whatever you believe about our law that we have, was well within our constitutional right. All protesting is well within our constitutional right. And we did this to show support for a family, to show support for a community, and to have something that was the antithesis of what we had been participating in. And because the police used force, they turned what we were doing into an act of resistance. And they always do that. That's their job, in a sense, is to use force on a community when they are standing together and standing against whatever it is the police stand for. And so the rest of the evening kind of played out as it did. They did use chemical agents against us. We moved into like a parking lot and kept playing. Many people left right after this incident, I think, out of fear and frustration and anger. I know that there was also a lot of children and families who had come to this event, you know, again, seeing a vigil and thinking, great, this is a place I can bring my kids. This is a place I can bring my family. Um, so we stayed for a while, and then my friends and I also ended up leaving peacefully, just walking to our cars. So I would say that the night still ended, hopefully, but it was not the night any of us were expecting. Uh, so now what I'd like to talk about is sort of what I've already been talking about, but just the way that repression and use of force and racism is ingrained in the Aurora Police Department. And Darren so incredibly compiled a list of many other police departments where racism is inherently ingrained. And if you look at it, if a police officer can arrive at a scene where Tamir Rice is sitting on a bench holding a gun and shoot him within 2 seconds and be protected by the law, is the police department racist or is the law racist? And if police departments are designed to uphold the law, are they not inherently racist? Is that escapable for any police department? No. And so I want to start talking about, I'm actually going to read some of the consent decree in Aurora because it's really pertinent. And I think, like Darren said, everyone should go look at it on aurora.gov. But just for some dates and some context, it's really short. So, or the introduction is short. It says Aurora Consent Decree. On November 22nd, 2021, the City of Aurora and the Colorado Attorney General jointly and voluntarily entered into a mutually beneficial legal agreement known as a consent decree, which the city considers its commitment to progress. The consent decree provides the Aurora Police Department, Aurora Fire Rescue, and Aurora Civil Service Commission with the opportunity to allocate resources, review current policies and adopt new ones, and focus training efforts in 5 key areas, also referred to as pillars. 1. Addressing racial bias in policing. 2. Constitutional policing. 3. Chemical restraints. 4. Recruitment, hiring, and promotion. And 5. Accountability and transparency. Darren's gone through a lot of this, but I think that, so it's now July 2024. This was adopted in November 2021. We're almost 3 years into this consent decree and into the Aurora Police Department agreeing to, we'll just start with the first one, to address racial biases in policing. Kylan Lewis was murdered last month because he was holding up a cell phone. Police pulled up, he was holding up a cell phone, they said he had a gun, they shot him. How many more times do we have to hear this story? And how many more times are we going to let a police department get away with adopting some kind of decree or law or something that doesn't actually hold them accountable? Doesn't actually ask them to do anything except for write some things down on paper, say that they're doing it. This also has a 5-year, it says like a sunset. The consent decree is scheduled to sunset after 5 years. So they're 3 years into their 5-year process. And last month they murdered a Black man in cold blood, essentially. So we're supposed to believe that in 2 more years, this police department is going to start upholding all of these things and they're going to figure out how to retrain all of their officers. It's unbelievable, right? Like, why? Is there a reason to believe this? No. So I think that's why what you're doing here today is so important. And this flyer that Giselle made, like, go to your city council. This is the only thing that ever wins, is people, communities standing up in a room together and fighting for what we know we believe in and what we know we deserve. Because we deserve better than this. Boulder deserves better than this. Aurora deserves better than this. Denver deserves better than this. Elijah McClain deserves better than this. Kylan Lewis deserves better than this. Tamir Rice, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. We could make lists and lists of people who deserve better than this. And we all know it. And that's why you come here, because you believe that we deserve better. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, I'm not sure if you all have heard, but there was a campaign against my fellow organizers in the PSL in 2020, 2021, from the Aurora Police Department, charging my fellow organizers mostly of kidnapping police officers. It's bogus. It's bogus, and it's terrifying because they are my age, so late 20s, early 30s. They were sentenced to decades in prison that would have.
What are you talking about?
What am I talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what is it? We are the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We're yeah.
And what do you think about Vladimir Putin?
Can you just share? Coming from Zoom?
Yeah.
Then we'll have a question and answer.
Oh yeah. We'll have
Am I
a
live on
Q&A when
YouTube?
this is all done. I think maybe what I'm about to say will answer some of your questions now, and then you can ask some later as well.
No, I'm not. I do not agree with that. I want some questions to be answered now.
I think the host may need to mute Morton or ask him to leave.
No. It doesn't work like that. I'm a spy for Vladimir Putin.
I'm sorry, I just can't fully hear you. But I'm
I'm a
happy
spy
to
for
hear.
Vladimir Putin, man. So a bit more respect with me.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. All right, y'all, I'm just gonna finish up here. It won't take too much longer, okay? So my fellow organizers were arrested for allegedly kidnapping police officers. We had an action where we surrounded the Aurora Police Department, and they decided that that was kidnapping, which of course it wasn't. We were, again, well within our constitutional rights to protest a police department that murdered a member of our community. And the retaliation from the Aurora Police Department was swift and cruel and scary. They brought a SWAT team to one of our members' homes and arrested him in his home. They pulled 2 other members over in their cars. They held them for over a week in jail without seeing a judge, which is completely illegal. And then they charged them with these bogus charges that almost had them in prison for the rest of their lives. And the only thing that made it possible for my fellow organizers to win this lawsuit was people showing up. That was the only thing that made it possible, because were we to fight the system alone and quietly, they would have lost. They would be in jail right now. But we started a campaign and we got many people and organizations to sign on, understanding the racist quality of policing in America, understanding the racist system that we have here in America, and knowing that these people actually didn't do anything wrong. They didn't murder someone in the street in the middle of the night. They simply wanted to hold their police department accountable. And so I think, is it Chris? Chris, in the beginning, you said something really beautiful. You said, "We will not accept a passive peace." And I thought that was really incredible.
I am Vladimir Putin's spy.
Hello again. I thought that was really incredible.
Yeah, you have a nice smile. I gotta admit that you have a nice
I'm gonna wait one moment for Dylan.
lady. Yeah. Lady, hör me tonight. Now, hop on in that car and just get into GTA 5 and drive around with the song
Okay,
Lady.
we're gonna ask you
Hear
to
me
stop
tonight.
now.
This lawsuit was separate from the vigil, but there was a separate lawsuit about the vigil. There were many lawsuits that came out of 2020, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. There was one actually, and that was, Darren spoke about it. It was the one that paid out $750,000 to Yeah, that did exist. The lawsuit that I was talking about was different. So, but there were many lawsuits in Denver, Aurora, and the country that came out of 2020. But just to wrap up, Chris, you said your extremely beautiful quote, we will not accept a passive peace. And I see here a room full of people who is unwilling to passively accept what could be passively accepted. You could just let Stephen Redfern be your police chief. You could let that happen. But you won't. And I think that's really beautiful and incredible. And, you know, even if he is appointed police chief, I see a room full of people that will not allow him to continue the practices that he has been ingrained with from Aurora, that he so desperately tries to hide. And I think that you should all feel emboldened and confident that you're in a room full of people who all believe, like I said, that you all deserve better. So thank you so much for having me. And I'll be here for the Q&A if you need anything.
Thank you, Al, and thanks everyone. I don't know how I got the wrong slideshow, but there were a few other things I'd like to share about what we'd like to see in a police officer, because that's really important since we're about to choose a new police chief. One who's committed to de-escalation. I think I hit on that. Promotes and values fairness and looking what is right, not just what fits policy and complies with legality. We want an officer that possesses humility and models it for the police force beneath him and requires it. A willingness to listen and take feedback from the community. A willingness to deny. I think this one's important because I made it. But well, let me just tell you what it is. Willingness to deny calls for service if there is not a safety issue. For example, we get calls for a suspicious person in Boulder a surprising amount of time. And often, you know what that suspicion is? They're walking in an all-white neighborhood and they're not white. And or walking in the rain. And yeah. And in Boulder, if a dispatcher thinks that a call is BS and they shouldn't have to send an officer out, they have to get a supervisor to come to the dispatcher and they have to convince the supervisor that they shouldn't respond. It's so much easier to just send an officer. Just send Officer Lolatai, he'll go beat the shit out of him. Okay, we want a police chief who models and requires courteous interactions with community members, especially and including when making contact with a suspect. Don't start with compliance. And then a commitment to reducing disparate stops, arrests, and use of force based on race and ethnicity. And I had this in the slides, but I can share with you. In end of 2015, early 2016, after Michael Brown was murdered, the Associated Press did a study of a bunch of cities across Colorado, and Boulder was the second worst in the entire state for arresting Black men, and it was at 5 times the rate of the rest of the population. So that 4x rate of killing them in Aurora, here it's 5 times arrest rate. So they had this commitment to transparency. They put out, they've done 2 since 2016 presentations of their data. I can't remember when the last one was. It was 2 or 3 years ago. And it should be every year. And even when they have shown it, so between 2016 and maybe, I want to say it was 2019 because it was before COVID, people came together for that. Do you remember, Annette, going in person? Yeah, without masks. Yeah, so I think it was 2019. And virtually nothing had changed. We stopped police officers stop Black people at a way disproportionate rate. Because as a professor, a Black criminal justice professor from CU shared with me, it's called the white space, and you look out of place if you don't fit in, and you don't fit in if you have black skin. And part of it is just, I encourage people to read the book Blink, where they talk about our initial reaction to someone and this fear-based response. And it's way back in the brain where you can't control it. So in order to address that, the police need to learn to say, okay, this guy looks suspicious, but what's he really doing? When I met a professor who told me he sent his black college student to his car on the hill he had forgotten his briefcase. He went to the car. He was struggling with the keys to get in, maybe didn't know which car at first. So of course the police came, right? Young black man walking in a very white neighborhood. We need a commitment to changing that. And how we know if we're changing that is looking at the data. SB 2217 says anytime you do one of these, I forget what they're called, but it's a discretionary stop where they just decide to stop somebody. They're supposed to write down now their race, their ethnicity, and the reason for the stop. We haven't seen that data since 2020, 2024, right? The police are not sharing that information. Deputy Chief Redfern has been here since 2021. He's now leading our police force. He talks about transparency. He talks about meeting with the community, but we're not getting the data. Lolatai, I with Dan Williams, who's in the audience, we sued the city of Boulder and Lolatai because he took down a black man who was simply trying to film him harassing some homeless people. And we've been asking, I've gone to the police oversight panel, asked, just get the data on use of force for individual officers. You can anonymize that and then get it for every officer, see what the average is. Guess how much worse? I mean, it was no surprise, but we could have found Lolatai's behavior being so bad just by looking at like the easiest math for any statistician whatsoever. Look at the average and then look at each officer. And you might, they didn't maybe need to fire Lolatai, but they could have said, hey, you're using force at over 8 times the average police officer. What's going on here? What was going on with Lolatai is he loved beating the shit out of people. He had a badge and he had immunity and he could do it to his heart's desire. I looked at the data and said, how often is it between his uses of force? Most often he did it within a week, within days. He just loved it. And the police could have known that. They probably do know that. We should know that. All right. So this is supposed to be a dialogue at this point. And I've asked Annette if she would field questions. But before we do that, because Giselle passed out those flyers to you, Giselle, you want to talk to folks about what those are? One of them is a letter to City Council. And are they marked on there? Okay, then I'll just let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. A huge thank you to our presenters and all of the co-sponsoring organizations, and huge thank you to all of you for being here today, giving your time to talk about this and be in community together. This is really important. So thank you everyone for spending your time here today. I just want to walk you through this piece of paper that you all should have gotten. If you didn't get one by accident, there's some in that back corner of the room over there. So make sure you get one. So we have 2 QR codes here. The first one, if everyone who feels comfortable or is able to pull out your phone and scan the first QR code, it is a 1-click letter to Boulder City Council. I counted 50-ish people in the room today. So if everyone sends this, that will send to every city council member in Boulder plus the city manager. So that's 10 letters that you'll send. It takes about 2 minutes. And it would be great if by the end of the night we had 500 total letters sent. That would be an awesome goal to reach. So if anyone would feel comfortable or would like to help with that, you scan this QR code and you enter just a little bit of information. We don't store or share that information. Obviously, it's just like the standard form letter form thing. But you know, we maintain your privacy and everything. And the letter's already written. I want to thank NAACP and Darren for writing the letter. And you can send the letter as is. You can add your own personalization to it, but it only takes about 2 minutes. So if everyone could just pull out your phone and send that letter, that would be amazing. The second one here is our action number 2, which is to speak at an upcoming Boulder City Council meeting on August 1st. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to this QR code and that will take you to a Google Doc that has a sign up link where you can sign up to speak. I do just want to flag that you do have to sign up prior to registering or prior to the meeting. Boulder City Council is interesting. They select speakers based on a lottery. So just because you sign up doesn't mean that you necessarily will be guaranteed to speak. Although the more of us who sign up to speak, the more of a chance that this issue is the one that will be spoken, because we'll, you know, increase the chances of our voices being heard. So it starts at 6 p.m. Public comment usually starts at the beginning, only goes for like a couple minutes, or is it 2 or 3 minutes to speak? Yeah. No, you don't have to live in the city of Boulder to speak. Anyone can speak, and anyone who's concerned about this should speak. And you can speak virtually as well. So you can speak in person or you can speak virtually. But to figure out if you're on the list of speakers on Wednesday evening before the meeting's on a Thursday. Wednesday evening, usually between like 4 to 5 p.m., but it varies. They'll email a list out of people who were randomly selected to speak. They only have 20 speakers at the beginning of the city council meeting. So you'll see if your name is on the list, and then just make sure you join the meeting at 6 at least, or 5:45 if you want to be safe, but 6 is when it starts. And then just wait for your name to be called and make sure you're present when your name is called, and say whatever you feel called to say, hopefully about this issue. And yeah, if you have any other questions about these things or anything in general, my name is Giselle. I'm with the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. And yeah, thanks again, once again, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, Giselle. And when you go to the link for city council, there's talking points. They're vetted. These are cited. If you look at the letter, you'll see the citations. The talking points are culled from that. And you can only get 2 minutes. I encourage you to write those down. And I encourage you to do this. We really want, so we're doing this to educate and communicate with our community about this issue. But the people who really need to push for it are city council, and the decider in this case is the city manager. So having 10 of us, 15 of us on August 1st on Thursday night speak, whether it's virtually or in person, if you can make it, is a powerful thing. It's hard for them to ignore us, as they do as much as they can when we're present like that. And we're about to open up questions. So we got a hand in the back.
City manager can decide. What is the process?
And Ned, can I have you start doing this? But I'm going to stay up there.
What you're talking about, this SB thing, you can repeat it again, whatever. Oh, okay, what is the process exactly between now and when is this going to take place? Who decides who the sheriff's going to be? That's what I think I'd like to know. And repeat what the SB rule is that you were talking about.
SB 2217, to answer the last question. The city manager ultimately has hiring.
When does he just?
We do not know.
Oh,
There wasn't, so we were expecting it to end around the end of the year, because it should be a very detailed process that involves the community and gives us all time to get to know the candidates, right? Then an article came out. So we're expecting around December. Then an article came out that said by the end of the summer, whatever that means. July 8th, they said they were going to start assessing the candidates that had come in already. All right. So does that answer your question? We don't know, but
and
they have
where
said
can we
end of
see the
summer.
list of candidates?
They haven't put that out yet, to my knowledge. They've only said that they have candidates they're vetting now.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So, can we get the microphone?
Hold on, Lynn, hold on.
Mhm.
Maris Harold left, and that's why the emergence of the thing happened, right? I mean, normally if she was retiring or quitting, then there'd be a normal process of us finding a police chief. And so it's just kind of sudden. So, and do they really have to have an interim police chief? You know, until we choose one? It just seems kind of premature, and it seems like the public, I know I would have been out there saying, I want community policing. I want, you know, like much, much, much further than any of this is going. And I was not solicited.
Well,
It's
there
just-
does need to be, my understanding, there needs to be the top officer, the chief. You know, it's a very hierarchical, military style organization, the police departments. Someone's got to be the guy that makes, or the woman that makes those decisions.
Yeah, why wasn't that Alistair? He's been there.
We don't know.
You know, and like
So
this guy from
that
this
is a-
awful place.
That is a
comes
good
in,
question.
You know,
We are wondering ourselves, why this guy? They brought him in several years in advance of her quitting, and he was the one they want. And there's a lot to, I won't go into, but there's a lot that makes it look like the whole process of getting candidates is so they can pick the guy they want. Right? So do you imagine that this guy from APD with this history that I shared with you is going to be the best candidate they can find in the entire country? Is that a yes, Neil? Right. Okay, I want to give other people a chance. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm Erica and I live in Longmont and work in restorative justice.
Can you speak just a little louder?
Sure, yeah, how's this? I'm Erica and I live in Longmont and I work in restorative justice. And I'm just curious about where the best place to add a inquiry about something that you said of the data shows the change.
So if you Google or choose your own search engine, Police Oversight Panel Boulder, that group has the authority to request the data. They can also request, I mean, they can make a lot of requests, but I believe they have raised that issue and have asked for it. It hasn't been delivered, but the more we do that, the better. A great place would be at the city council meeting. Why can't we see this data? I mean, there's articles about Lolatai being nearly 10 times, using force nearly 10 times as much as the rest of the data. We only know that because of our lawsuit. That was part of our settlement. We want the data for the period, a couple of years period, when Lolatai was active.
Thank you. That was actually more than I thought was going to come from the data piece. My question is actually about where the best place to solicit for how to change the data. In my mind, the data is showing if changes happened or not. And there's something around police cadets having more proximity with the communities that they're going to be serving that I think is essential for them to be in relationship before they're policing them. So is that a good comment to bring to city council, or where does that inquiry best live?
Again, city council,
City council,
you know,
thank you.
ultimately it's the city manager,
Okay.
but city council gets to give their opinions. Yeah. And as far as the living in their community, yeah, when I just looked at a house that looked just so small and was $1.6 million in Boulder. Do you think of where are police going to live? You know, on the hill with a bunch of other college students, maybe, because there's just nowhere. Thankfully, Boulder Progressives did a lot of work, and now at the state level, they've changed the law on more people being able to live with each other. But if you're an officer with a family, it's out of reach.
I just did a walk with an organization called Talk a Mile that founded in 2020 with a white male father and his mixed race son. They started this organization where they get urban youth to walk with police cadets for a mile and talk? And what are the tough questions? And there's just more familiarity. So the mind body has to change really neurologically. If
Yeah.
it's like 6 weeks staying in a residency, or it doesn't have to be living together.
And can I ask you a quick question since you're in Longmont? What do you think of the Longmont police? I mean, they're not even called the police, right? They're the community safety or something. They don't call themselves Longmont police.
Yeah, I pause because I think anytime there's the large grouping of and homogenizing a group there's some risk there
Sure.
of stereotyping. And I have had great experiences with police in Longmont with my identity. I do know that in Longmont, the restorative justice program is pre-ticket, and that's a partnership with the police department, that police are trained around restorative justice. I would be more liberal about what I'd allow to restorative justice, but they will make referrals so youth can bypass the criminal justice system entirely. I also know that when George Floyd was murdered, the restorative justice community could not speak on that issue, or the police wouldn't back up their RJ program anymore. So it's really,
And you're part of the restorative justice program.
I have a private practice, but I'm in relationship with them. So
Okay.
it's a mix of taking individuals as individuals and addressing the collective of a group and how they either are accountable or not.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, just kind of going along with the questions that Erica was raising. This sounds like a really important first step of questioning who our police chief should be. Is there more strategic plan about policing in general in Boulder? And what is that plan? How are we deciding it? And how can we get involved?
Yeah. And that gives me the thought that if you want to go to council and you don't feel comfortable speaking against something, against Redfern getting this job, speaking about what you want, the way that we discussed, and also what that process looks like. When are we going to be involved? Give us enough time to get to know these people, get feedback from the community. Don't just do one event and say, well, you got to meet them all. Here we go. We're picking this one, right? So yeah, I would love to hear someone talking about that at the council meeting. Do we have any other thoughts?
Actually,
questions?
Darren, can we check with the Zoom to see if anybody on Zoom has questions?
Oh, thank you. Michael, do you have anyone on Zoom who wants to ask any questions? Michael is the man behind the curtain. Don't mind him, but he's minding us. Maybe if I disconnect this, I might break everything. But we'll see if I can pull up Zoom myself. And I hope you all enjoyed the picture of me and my wife at Dillinger's. All right, so I can see folks. I'm going to see if we have questions in the chat. Here we go.
I guess this is Holly again. I guess the only discussion we had was if we can scan the QR codes, being the virtual participants. But we did get an offer to supply our email address, and maybe we'll get an email later. Although I do think if someone held it up in front of the camera, we could probably scan it, but it might be more trouble than it's worth.
All right, let me get one of those flyers and see if I can do it.
Yeah,
So-
or we could do it at the end so you don't waste time.
All right. Thank you for that, Holly.
Sure.
Anybody else has a question?
Yeah, I don't have this yet. Did you send this to me, Giselle? Or could you email it to me and then I can share it later?
I did want to say something more about the city council. They have changed the policy
Can you wait? So I think our folks online.
City council has changed the policy and modified it. Maybe Giselle explained it. I don't know. First of all, number one, I will tell you, Aaron Bruckett cuts you right off in the middle of a sentence. He is basically just looking at a clock the whole time you're talking. He's not listening to anything you say, but it is on tape, yada, yada. And maybe he'll get a little gentler over time. But they now say that I believe there are two things. Number one, I believe that you cannot have someone else speak in your stead if you show up and you can't. You tell them that you can't, but I think that that's just a vacant hole. Number two, if you spoke the week before, you can't speak again. And I don't know how long this goes for, like, if you spoke 3 weeks ago, you still can't speak, whatever. But they're saying they're trying to be more equitable and yada, yada. But you can't also wear, thanks for this, you can't have a sign that's larger than, you better look it up, but you can bring a sign, but you can't hold it over your head so you're blocking the people behind you, because people were doing that a lot. So they were trying to control what they considered the chaos of the people. And so it's much stricter and less friendly, I would say.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Does anyone have questions, or maybe, if we run out of questions, I'd love to hear your experiences with police in Boulder. I mean, I mentioned that I think that I used to film the police largely interacting with homeless people. And I've seen very kind police officers. And with that population, that's rare. I almost never saw that. But I will just pull out my phone and start videoing a cop anytime I'm around them, seeing something happen. And some of them, they do exactly what I would call the ideal. They ignore me, number one, but they're courteous. They're asking. It's not that hard, and there are police who do it. We need a police chief who says that's what I expect. All right, Elaine. Microphone, please.
Dr. Redfern, and I asked him, why did you switch that from suspicious to assault on an officer on the dispatch code? Okay, I asked him about the dispatch code, and he said, because if I didn't, I couldn't get evidence. So what do you think of that?
That was his reason for changing?
Yeah, and my thought afterwards was, well, then why don't you change the rules?
My thought is the call logs, every piece of evidence should be as truthful as possible. That call was because someone thought Elijah McClain looked strange because he had a mask on. I think he had asthma, and because he was flapping his hands, because I think I don't know why, but that is certainly not a reason to take someone down. And so it just, someone thought he was black, and someone thought he was suspicious, right? And that's not what's in the call log. So what I can say is all of the evidence should be truthful and should not be designed to exonerate the officers. And that's exactly what it looks like it was designed for. Yes.
Hi, I was wondering if you could put a finer point on the statement that you made regarding city council when you took all of this information to them. And as you said, you have citations and everything. And I don't want to misquote you, but you said something similar to, well, they said, what else do you have? Or what else is, so what was the source of the resistance? What did they say in terms of why they were requesting more information?
So we've learned more since then, and we've certainly shared it. We have shared information with the city of Boulder several times. There's a woman on the Zoom who was actually at the trial and heard about this. We found out, we immediately wrote a letter, and it was mostly about the change of the call logs, how awful what happened to Elijah McClain was, and that we wanted to see Maris Harold and Deputy Chief Redfern step down. So the first response was from the city manager. I can tell you from doing a quarter request that wasn't a letter from the city manager. It was a letter from the city it had gone all around to be discussed how to respond to this. And they basically said, changing the call logs is typical. And they gave an example of, well, if we show up, for, we just get a call and it's like someone's fighting. We don't really know what it is. But then we get there and it's domestic violence. We might initially have disturbing the peace. So we change it to domestic violence. Well, sure, that makes sense. But those two are not very far away, right? So they used that to say he was doing exactly what a police officer is supposed to do. And then we found out about the black man shot in Denver when Redfern chased him out of his jurisdiction. And we brought more and more to light. So we've shared most of what I shared tonight. We have shared with them. And so what we get back is from the city is, well, what else do you have? That's the context. They say, we've heard all that and we still think he's the best officer for the job. Well, for the interim chief, I mean, right. No, but I wonder how much anyone in this room would be willing to bet against me that he will be the pick. There's a lot of activity going on. For example, and I see your hand, Doug. Can you take him the microphone next?
Can we do that?
But there's a lot. For example, Redfern has gone on a media blitz to, I can say, westward, at least one publication in Denver. He initially said he didn't want to do an interview on KGNU, or I think they said we want it to be a question and answer. He said no, but he eventually went on there, not for a question and answer. But the media blitz and the pushback that we get from city manager and others on city council saying that this is a great guy. I believe that the organization that's been hired to do a search nationally is a much smaller organization than the last one that was used to find Maris Herald. So it's just information that points to that. I can't say that anyone has said he's our guy. Can you do it on the microphone so people can hear you?
I'll just add that all of the information that Darren has shared tonight was available to them before he got elevated to interim. So it's not like they learned it after the fact.
So is there like something that the city manager values the most that would actually change their mind? Because going back to your question, what it sounds like is the city manager doesn't really care about anything that you brought up or anything that you will bring up.
Mhm.
And so what does the city manager historically care about in the actions that the city manager has taken that could be used as an angle? Or why is the city manager there at all?
Annette, would you want to take that one?
I think that's a really valid observation, but we're the community and we're the people who are subjected to policing. And the way policing works in any community says a lot about that community. And I would argue that there's no difference in policing in Boulder than if you're in Columbus, Mississippi or Springfield, Illinois. The difference is demographics. So if we want to create an environment, it is up to us. It is up to us to demand what we want in policing, because I think Elle described it. Law enforcement it has a history of racism, systemically brutal, and it has never been purged of that. So we have to start thinking about these values, and we have to hire people with the values, not try to train in the values after we've hired them. And past performance is the best predictor of future performance. So it's why you bring a resume.
All right. I want to share for the folks on Zoom. I have up for you. I hope you should be able to see it. The QR code for sending a letter to city council. If you want to click on that. And then I'll put the other one up in a moment. Sorry for the distraction, trying to get that done. What's our time?
Oh.
We are over. So I just want to get a couple more, and I thank you all for staying late. I'm sorry we had to start late. Go ahead, Doug.
All right, yeah, thanks for putting on this, and thanks for the organizations that
If
sponsored.
you hold it straight.
Oh yeah, thanks for the organizations that sponsored it, and thanks for putting this on. I guess one question is on this changing of the colleagues. I hate to get stuck on it because but they said it was like standard procedure. When I first got the news about that, I tried to search and find like a procedure where it talked about that, and I don't know, I could never find anything that said this is a standard police procedure or a written procedure. So is there stuff like that, or is this? I mean, I feel like we're having to take their word for it that that's the standard procedure.
Did you look at the Boulder police policies for that?
I couldn't. No, I didn't find those.
Okay.
So is that what
You searched but didn't find?
Yeah, I mean, I searched all over different police departments. They don't really have the procedures listed. I couldn't find them for Boulder.
I tried the same thing. I couldn't find anything.
Okay. I mean, you'd think you would look throughout the internet and be able to find something that says this is a standard procedure, but I couldn't find that. I tried changing the call. Well, that's what they say. Yeah. But I mean, and I asked, and like, can you cite that? And I don't know. They don't listen to me.
Yeah. Annette, did you want to say something?
So yeah, NAACP wanted to know the same thing because that's what they came back to tell us, that it was procedural. So my question is, if it's procedural and you're the head man on duty or woman on duty, and you show up at a call that was a suspicious person, before you leave the scene, the person is being taken away in an ambulance, you're getting radioed that he is near death, right? That he's flatlining in the ambulance. And you say that you don't look at the body-worn camera for 2 years. Regardless, even if you could do this legally, where is the integrity? Where is the caring? Where is the courtesy? Where is the just curiosity? One would want to know. And I think these are values that must be inherent in whoever we hire.
Hi, thanks, and thanks so much for holding this meeting tonight. So, when we know who the candidates are and where they come from, could we have a committee go interview people in the communities where these people are coming from and see what their experiences have been?
I mean, we can try. I think that's a great idea. When Maris Harold was one of the selected people, I actually spoke with someone from the Cincinnati NAACP, and they said, we don't like everything about her, but she did some good things. So it's helpful, not dispositive in getting a good one, but we should still do that kind of due diligence. I will say on the NAACP, we have a lot of committees. I'm the Criminal Justice Committee chair, and there's just so darn much work. So is it a good idea? Yes. Will we be able to do it? Not sure. Would the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center have the capacity to do that, or join with us to do that, to divide and conquer in terms of doing it for everyone? I love that we've come.
What do you really seeing about developing a committee? I know we've done this on the unhoused issue, going to communities, you know, together to interview the communities and the power structure of the communities about what's working and what's not working. So I think that I'd like to work on getting a committee together of people who will be going to the communities where these people come from and finding out more about them and their experiences.
I think that's so important, Betty, and a critical, what's critical to be able to do that is if the city doesn't, you know, bring them out on stage, let us see them and hear them talk for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and then make their decision in a week. We need time. So the process that this lady was talking about earlier, the process needs to allow us to do that and have time to do that. We don't need to, you know, do I want the interim chief to be out and a new one selected? Yes, but we should be given time. And he can stay interim chief, I guess, until we have that time. I do want to ask, I know we're running late. Izzy, are we doing all right? All right. Izzy has been my contact at the church to make sure we could be here, and we're going late. And I know Michael's staying late for us. I want to ask Ella a question and kind of by way of informing folks. The Attorney General of Colorado investigating the APD, that he didn't just do that on his own. Can you talk a little bit, if you know, about what that process was? Because I know I believe what you guys did was critical to that happening. So if you could talk about that. Well, I mean, just how it came to be, like the governor made that decision, but it was after you guys were protesting and consistently calling them out. There was no voluntary act of the Attorney General to do this.
I think what Darren's getting at is that, you know, the Attorney General of Colorado, there's no, like you were talking about, there's no reason for the system to hold the system accountable, right? Like they're on the same side. So the only thing that ever brings any of this to light is us, is the people. And like you were saying, like we need to decide for ourselves what we want our communities to look like. We need to have the imagination and the ideas so that we can bring that to, unfortunately, some of the people in power right now and say, like, actually, we have opinions and we have goals and we have desires and we have ideas about what actually keeps our communities safe and what actually is functional for, you know, so we don't have this like hegemonic, like you were talking about, this homogenous like group of people just deciding for everyone else what happens. So the way that it happened with the Attorney General was like the case I was speaking about when APD brought charges against my fellow organizers. We made that into a worldwide campaign. We have contacts in all different countries and certainly across the United States. And we said, like, this is an unjust thing. And that was the thing that triggered the Attorney General to say, okay, maybe we do need to look at the Aurora Police Department, but like with a little bit of an eye roll, right? It's kind of like behind the scenes, they're like, hey guys, we like have to do this thing. So, you know, we're going to look into you as a police department and we're going to have this consent decree and you'll agree to it. And then in 5 years, it'll go away. And that's what happens. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing that happens, because then we all start to learn. We start to learn how our system operates, how it operates in conjunction with other parts of our system, and why, you know, police officers can get away with these things. And it is illuminating, and it ends up to us all being in rooms like this, where it's like, okay, well, if we want things to change, we have to make it change. So I don't know if that really procedurally answers your question, Darren. But I did have a question, and it was actually to highlight someone's question who I think left, but I feel like there's kind of a sentiment in the room about this seems like a really good first step. But somebody asked if there was like any sort of plan or strategy around organizing around policing in Boulder. And I was wondering if that was something that is on the horizon for y'all or what that looks like.
So the NAACP and our Criminal Justice Committee and our Executive Committee work on policing issues all the time. This young Black man that's going to maybe go to trial at the end of this month, we have lobbied as hard as we can so far without pushing so hard that we think there'd be backlash from the district attorney's office, right? On this issue, we've been taking it one step at a time. Pulling this event together, we were thinking about this in December. We wanted to get all of the organizations and Boulder DSA and Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center and others that came tonight and got their members to come. It took a long time to build that. So in terms of the next steps, we'll be engaging with the city council or city manager, probably more likely, to try to find out what is your process for this hire. If you're going to conclude that this is the best hire for this position, we want to see a very transparent process. So we'll be engaging in that way. In terms of the community, number one, I do invite you to join the NAACP Boulder County branch at naacpbouldercounty.org. There's lots of committees. So if this isn't your jam, maybe education is, but the numbers help. But yeah, we don't have a specific next step. Letters to the editor. I would invite any of you to write letters to the editor of the Daily Camera. People at the city hate that, because that goes, like, we're talking with 50 of ourselves, right? 50 community members. I don't know what the reach of the Daily Camera is anymore, but it's definitely big. And I do want to wrap up. Is there any last question? And I have a quote that I want to share with you. Lynn, go ahead. One sec. Can you wait for the microphone? Thank you.
You asked for stories, and I had something stolen allegedly from me, 4 feet from me in the municipal building. And a city employee said that he took it for his boss, another city employee, his supervisor in the children's department of the library. And when the police were asking him, what did you do with it after you grabbed it? He invoked his Miranda rights. There was I don't know how much money it costs investigation. I never wanted an investigation. I didn't want to prosecute the guy. I just wanted to talk to him. And he happened to be on surveillance camera. It was 15 seconds from when I removed my computer.
And this was the city employee, right?
Yeah, a city employee in the children's department of the library. And I couldn't even ever see him. Now he's gone and his boss is gone. I don't know if they got fired. I don't know if they quit. I don't know what happened.
Well, I'll just finish by saying that it all goes to transparency in government, just like transparency from the police chief. So when we wrote our first letter to the city calling for Redfern to be removed, we wrote this, and I'll end with it. In his final letter to the world, titled "Together You Can Redeem the Soul of Our Nation," civil rights icon John Lewis wrote, "If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain." That John Lewis used his dying voice to express this cannot be forgotten, and Boulder's complicity cannot go unanswered. So with that, thank you all for being here tonight. Grab some pizza, grab some drinks. It's less to carry out. Thank you very much.